Hey guys, today I'm going to show you how to make a multi-purpose Future Bass Chord Lead using Ableton's analog instrument. Here's how it sounds. You can go ahead and download this rack for free right now by clicking the link below and then entering your email address. Simple as that. If you're still with me, I'm going to show you how I went about making this rack. Analog, in my opinion, is a really underrated soft synth, but if you know how to use it, it can sound really great, especially in genres like future bass, liquid trap, or even liquid drum and bass, etc. So let's just dive in and get to work. Okay, with analog on a track, let's right-click on the title bar and choose Group. Now we can assign macros to various controls, something I always highly recommend. So the first thing you kind of always tackle with a synthesizer is the oscillators. Here we're going to use saw waves in both oscillators, and we're going to pan them hard left and right to get the sound as wide as possible. We'll use a full sustain on both. And let's back off the attack on one of them so that it comes in just a tiny bit later. I'm going to turn the left oscillator down a bit and detune it a bit. Okay, so now the first really important characteristic aspect of this sound is the quick rising pitch, which is kind of a standard technique in future bass. Luckily, doing this in analog is really easy. We'll just go to the top of each oscillator and lower the pitch envelope initial value right here. Since I want to be able to adjust both oscillators' pitch envelopes at the same time, I'm going to macro map this to macro 1. And do the same for the other oscillator. Now you can really just experiment with the starting pitch of your synth, which will just depend upon the song and the context. You can also, though, experiment with how fast the pitch will ramp up to its end value with this slider. Let's macro map this guy to macro 2. Again, where you set this will just depend upon your taste and the context, but personally I would probably put it somewhere around 35 to 40, somewhere in there. Okay, no synth patch would be complete without a little white noise. This will give the sound a little high-end fizziness, let it kind of sound loud. Again, adjust this to taste. It's kind of like the salt of the dish, if you will. Okay, next up, let's work on vibrato. First, we got to turn vibrato on, and then let's macro map the amount to the next available macro. We'll use a little bit of attack so that the vibrato comes in gently. Somewhere around here is probably good. And finally, let's map the delay of the vibrato to macro 4. So just to recap what these two macros are doing here, we have the vibrato amount, but then we can specify how fast it comes in. and that can be a really cool effect in and of itself. Again, where you set these will totally depend on your song, or they're really great candidates for automation. Okay, right below Vibrato is Unison, which is really going to thicken up the sound of this synthesizer. Let's turn it on. Let's max out the voices at 32. Then max out the Unison voices. We can only get 4 of these, but that's okay. And now let's turn up the delay on these extra voices until it sounds cool. And finally, let's detune these voices, and we're really going to hear what Unison does. So as you can hear, the effect of detune ranges from subtle to pretty extreme. So let's macro map it so that we can adjust it later as per our needs. Okay, now let's dive into the filters. This is probably the most complicated part of the whole process, but it's also where the real fun begins, since it's going to have a really big impact on our sound. Let's make sure they're both set to low pass 12 dB filters. You could experiment with 24 dB, but for now I'm just going to do 12. Next, I'm going to click the slave button here so that filter 2's frequency follows filter 1's, which is just very convenient. And now let's quickly macro map filter 1's cutoff. Dial in some resonance, maybe around 20 or so. Feel free to go a little higher here if you're feeling it. Okay, I recommend cranking the envelope to velocity slider so that the notes with high velocity open up the filter more, and notes with lower velocities will do the opposite. Okay, next, the shape of our filter needs some attention, so let's set the decays to around 500 milliseconds. Now let's macro map the sustain of both filter envelopes. Now we can really quickly go from loud and sustained to plucky. Cool. Lastly, let's saturate the filters a little bit with a little drive. In this case, let's go for the harshest one, ASIM 3, but all of these sound good and they're just kind of progressive levels of distortion. Alright, after analog, I added some basic EQ. A little reverb. A touch of compression. A sprinkle of delay. Get a little motion going. Then an EQ in mid-side mode. A glue compressor for some limiting. And finally, auto pan, which is the last item I'll go into today. The trick here with auto pan is to put the phase down at 0. And when you do this, you're going to get a pumping effect, or what might otherwise sound like heavy sidechain compression or ducking. Let's crank the filter sustain so that we can really hear this pumping effect. In this case, I chose an inverted sawtooth so that the sound ramps up after a bar, but there are other shapes. And if one bar is too long, you can change the speed of the pumping to other values as you see fit. Let's macro map the amount to macro 8. Okay, that wraps up this lesson on how to use Ableton's analog to achieve a nice, thick Future Bass lead sound. Again, click the link below and enter your email address to download this rack for free from warpacademy.com. This has been DJ IBG. See you later.